So in this tutorial we're going to have a look at unwrapping some basic primitives and try to get an understanding of UV shell shapes, especially in relation to hard and soft edges and ultimately high to low poly bakes as well, as they can have an impact on how you create your particular UV shells and how soft and hard edges are applied. So I'm going to assume that we've got a high poly. If it's a case you don't have a high poly, then this step can slightly differ in terms of how you approach the unwrapping process, but I would suggest that you stick with this methodology in all cases, because in the long run you would have a high poly and low poly for all of your components. So I've just set this scene up. This scene can be found on Blackboard as well. I've got my high poly primitives there and I've got my low poly primitives there. I haven't bothered to name underscore LP and HP for the purpose of this demo. In the long run you obviously would do so, but for the purpose of this, because none of these assets are in fact intersecting or on top of each other or right next to each other, when I bake, the naming convention isn't really that applicable because they're all separated off. So I'm going to leave it as is for the time being. So the thing to note is what I've done is I've made sure that I've applied some form of color system to try and identify which is which. So my red being my high poly and my green being my low poly. So with the high poly I've literally just chamfered all the edges in most cases and subdivided it further with smooth. So on that note, what you have to remember is when you press 1, 2 and 3, that's going to give you an indication of visually of how your asset is going to smooth. So if I just press 1 again, that's going to be the default. 2 will show you the wireframe, the original wireframe in relation to the turbo smooth or the smoothed version, and 3 is just going to hide the wireframe and show the asset. So the thing to note is what you do not want to be doing is pressing 3 and then exporting this as your high poly. From my understanding, Substance Painter will not acknowledge this as being a turbo smooth high poly variant. It will literally just take that as an example. It will literally use this, it will not use that. So just bear that in mind. The way to resolve that is obviously use smooth. So what you can do is shift right click and click on smooth, and within this you put the subdivisions to 2 or whatever it is you want, and then that is the version you would in fact export. I'll just undo that. So that's what I've done with these, hence the reason why you've got lots and lots of tessellation in the actual geometry. So let's now unwrap these. I'm just going to undo a few steps because I've actually moved my particular high poly, so I'm just going to move that back in location. So that's exactly just there. So we'll need to unwrap. So at this instance we can hide the high poly, we don't necessarily need to have those showing right now. We'll just show the low poly. And a quick hint is, obviously we know we can bring the UV editor by Windows, Modeling, UV Editor. You can always bring that up here, but if you're using a single screen, then it can be problematic in terms of you don't want to be moving this around in relation to that. So the alternative is literally just going to full screen, and then within here you've got panels and saved layout, and you can choose perspective and UV editor over here. So that's going to make life a bit easier. So let's now have a look at how to approach the mapping with regard to all these. So we could do these individually. They all are separate at the moment. I probably should combine them for the purpose of the export, but I'll keep them separate for the time being. Obviously if I select all of them, everything will appear. If I select an individual one, only an individual one will appear. So there is no right or wrong in how you approach this. We could do everything together, or we could do things independently. Naturally, if we do things independently, it is a bit easier to understand what's going on because you're only looking at one particular asset rather than becoming potentially confused as a beginner when you've got so much going on. So I'll just do it individually. So I'm just going to frame in on that. So what we do need to do is we need to make sure our hard and soft edges are indeed correct. So from what I can see on here, they certainly are correct, so that's not necessarily an issue. But we need to make sure that we've got some visual indication that they are indeed correct. So what we need to do is right click, polygon display, and a few things we need to do first of all is we're going to turn on toggle border edges. So that's going to allow us to see border edges on our particular assets. So although you can't make it out a great deal on here, that's the actual border edge there. And you can just about make it out on these. It's probably down to my screen that you can't actually see it all that well. So turn on the border edges and make sure that you've got soft and hard edges set to display, toggle soft edge display. So make sure you do that, because that's going to give us a good indication of any potential issues in terms of the smoothing being incorrect, the hard and soft edges being incorrect. My apologies, I keep saying smoothing groups because it's the max terminology. Still trying to get my head around specifically just the Maya terminology. So let's now unwrap this. Looking at this, it's extremely similar to the barrel tutorial. It's literally just going to be a matter of selecting everything and just giving it one UV initially. So this process I'm teaching you now, it's not something that you have to do, in terms of you don't have to follow exactly how I do things. You can design your own production pipeline, but I tend to use something which is slightly methodical and makes sense. So what I'll do initially is I'll always just give everything one UV. So I'm just going to do a camera based UV, and then it just allows me to visualize my scene a bit better. So now I can see straight away that clearly it's a cylinder, whereas previously, when it's at that stage, you've no idea what it is, even though you can see it on there obviously. So I'll just do that again. So I'm just going to make that camera based. So essentially what we need to do is we need to split off the sides, so this side, and obviously the top and bottom will be separate. So the thing to note is, whenever we have a 90-degree angle, we have to have a UV seam break in there, and obviously whenever we have hard edges as well, it's something to consider when it comes to the unwrap side of things. Where we've got these hard edges, we'll need to put a break in there as well. So this is very, very straightforward. We're literally just going to select all the sides, so we can do that by just dragging in the middle within this, or obviously dragging within the middle within that. So now that you've got those sides selected, even though it's not that obvious because the top and the bottom you can't see a great deal. So we've got the sides selected. We are literally just going to control right click to edges, edge perimeter, and press Shift X to introduce a UV break in there. And just so we can find out what's going on with this, because it can be a bit confusing as well, if we just turn on UV shells, we can now move these independently, or you can just do the layout option as well. So I'm actually missing the toolkit at the moment, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open that up via tools, and over here in this case it's going to hide it again, but you just need to go show UV toolkit, which is essentially going to be exactly the same as what you had on the actual UV toolkit UV editor window by default, but in this case, because I've done show perspective and UV, it's now detached from there. So what I can do is I can just essentially drag that across to here. I should be able to add it to the side, so that's now attached to the side. So I've obviously moved all of these, so I'll just undo a few steps. I've moved things around just to try and comprehend what's going on. If you don't want to move individually because there's lots and lots of individual shells, you can just hit layout at this point and it will separate things off. If the layout is doing something really weird and freaky like so, it shouldn't necessarily do that, but again, the nature of Maya is it can just be extremely unpredictable. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to go into my layout settings, so I'm going to press Shift and click on layout. I was going to make sure this tries to pack everything within 0 to 1. So it is saying full square on there. I'm going to press layout again. So I'm just going to click on legacy for the time being, hit layout. So that's putting everything in there, which is indeed correct. I put Unfold 3D, hit layout, and then it's making things massive again, so I'm not quite sure why that's happening. So that is something that we need to resolve really. There is no right or wrong in terms of which one you want to use. Ultimately, if I just put this down, in fact if I put this down to 256, let's see what that does. No? Right, I'm going to pause it and find out what on earth this thing is doing before I continue. So it's doing something strange, so you know what, we'll use an alternative method. So you can just hit layout along U and V as well. And stupidly now it's decided to play ball. I'm not quite sure what the hell's going on with it yet. So what I did was I essentially just, if anything's doing slightly unpeculiar and doing something weird, I just went to Unfold 3D and just hit reset settings on there, yeah. And that should by default reset everything as well. I'm just going to turn on translate and rotate as well. When you hit layout UVs, it shouldn't actually overlap, but for some reason it is. So I'm just going to hit layout along UV just to separate them off. We'll worry about ultimately packing it all or laying it out right at the end, and then we'll probably have to go back into this and make some adjustments as the case may be. I mean, you could have just used legacy, I suppose, and just hit layout UVs, and that would do the same thing. But it's probably just going to be quicker to just press layout along UV as well. So now that we've split that across, then we know that we just need to simply put a break in there and put a break in there. So what you can do is try and be consistent. So if I'm going to put a break in that one there, then it would suggest to me that I'll just press Control Spacebar, get full screen on there. I'm just going to put this UV toolkit back up as well. So if I'm going to put one there, I might as well put one here as well. Just be try and be somewhat consistent. So Shift X, and that's going to put a break in there. So now it's simply a matter of unfolding everything and essentially making sure that the text array is correct as well. So I'm just going to click on Unfold and Unfold. I'll press it a couple of times, no harm in that. So that's now unfolded. I'll need to make sure the text array is indeed correct. So I'm going to click on any one of these shells. It doesn't matter which one you do. I'm just going to click on Get, and I'm just going to select everything and just do a set. So in some cases it will change, in some cases it won't. In this instance it's perfect, so there's no concerns there. So that will do, and we just need to orientate the shells. Press Orient, and then I'm just going to press Layout again. So that would be good enough for this, not necessarily a problem. Everything seems good. There's a nice gap between everything, and the UV texture rate is also correct as well. We can always just confirm that. Just turn on your UV checker, which is over here somewhere. There we go, it's that one there, I always forget. And then just confirm that the squares are indeed correct. Obviously at this point over here, if we see this, and it's a much denser resolution, such as that, then clearly that's incorrect, isn't it? So this is where, if we did see that, we know it's incorrect, it's just simply going to be a matter of, in this case I've already done a get text array, so I can just click on set again and set that again. I'll have to just set that to everything, just set that, and we're going to have to hit layout again just to bring everything back into, or maximize the UV space. So cylinder, generally speaking, is always going to be top and sides and some sides. So let's now do the pyramid. Pyramid should be very straightforward. Again, we're going to apply the same principle. We are going to give it one giant UV shell. We're just going to literally just hit camera based projection on everything. In fact, while I'm there, I'll just do it on everything in one fell swoop. So now that I've got everything selected, I'm just going to click on create camera based and be done with. I can always press layout now at this point just to get everything into 0 to 1 UV space. So here we can see that's our pyramid, and we don't actually have any 90-degree angles on there, so we're not forced to put a break in, but it's advisable to put a break in at the bottom anyway on this particular one. So we literally just need to break that off. So I'm just going to click on edges to edge perimeter, Shift X, and then we just need to put a break in that particular edge as well, and then push Shift X, and again just do a quick unfold on that, quick orientate, quick layout. I suppose we might as well just hit set now as well and just layout, so that there would be perfect as well, and we can confirm that is the case by just clicking on the checker texture and making sure everything is plain ball, which it is, so that's good to go. When we have something like a hemisphere, slightly different approach, but well, it's slightly different, arguably it's exactly the same really. So in this instance, all we need to do is just break off the back and effectively press unfold, and we are done. So control right click, two edges, edge perimeter, and Shift X. That's going to give us two UV shells obviously, and just confirm that is the case by pressing layout. So now it's almost pointless pressing unfold on every single individual section, because ultimately we can do all of that right at the end. So I'm not going to bother pressing unfold. I'm literally just going to unwrap every single one, and then we'll do the unfold, the orientate, and the text arrays, and the layout on everything together in one fell swoop. Let's now do the sphere. So the best way to do a sphere is you could chop it in half. So don't forget we are using Substance Painter, and Substance Painter is very clever at making sure that there isn't seams in your actual texture. So we could just put a split directly down the middle. Shift X on there. So imagine it as a face. You've almost got the front of the face and the back of the head, so to speak. Front of the head and the back of the head. So that would do. Shift X. And you could even split this up further as well, for that matter, depending on how much, how perfect you want your textile rate, but 9 times out of 10 this would probably do the job quite nicely. So that's good to go as well. And again, I know I've got 2 independent shells now, so we'll press unfold and the whatnot on everything together later. So now we've got a cube. Easiest way to do a cube is not necessarily sit there and select every single edge. I mean, you could quite literally just press Shift X anywhere and do it in that sense, and that's going to break off every face, and you are literally done anywhere, to be fair. So you could do that, or the alternative is, generally speaking, you're not going to be using many projection, cylindrical, planar, that type of projection methodology, because you're going to put the splits in based on your understanding of where the UV seams need to be. But if you were to do this via one of those systems, then you could just literally hit automatic, and what it's going to do, as you can see in here, it's going to project from the top, from the bottom, from the front, the back, and the sides, and that's arguably the same thing as well as what we did previously by selecting all the edges. So 6 and 2 3s, there's 2 ways to do that. That's good to go. This is literally the same as the pyramid. Obviously, it's not much different. So just select the bottom half. Again, 2 edges, edge perimeter, Shift X. And we'll put a split down one of these edges there, so just that one there. Select that one and then press Shift X. So that's good to go. This is the same as obviously the very first cylinder. So we just need to break the sides, Shift X, and put a break in one of these. Sorry, put a break on the top and bottom, then put a break on the side, so Shift X again. That's going to give us 3 UV shells. If for any reason you are doubting whether it has done it correctly, just press layout, and then that will at least confirm that you've got 3 independent UV shells. And we can just about make out that we've got a UV break in there as well. So that one's good to go. Now we've got a Taurus. Again, very, very straightforward. It's literally just a cylinder, apart from the top and the bottom is effectively hidden. So imagine it's just been a cylinder with a bed modifier on, and then it starts here, there's the top, and effectively goes all the way around, and there's the bottom. So this should be very straightforward again. So I'm going to select that interior loop, Shift X, and then I'm going to double click, select one of the additional loops, and Shift X. And in this case, what I'll do, I know it's correct, but I'm just going to press unfold anyway, and you can see what it's done there. So that's good to go. And now we've got something which is arguably exactly the same. It's obviously quite a complex object, but it's the exact same process as what we see on here, which is ultimately the same as what is on there, arguably, in terms of the approach to adopt. It's effectively just a cylinder, isn't it? Yeah. So we'll select top and the bottom, and control 2 edges, edge perimeter, Shift X. So move that over to the side, make sure that's broken off. Yes, it is. So again, you want to try and hide your seams where possible. So I'm going to select that interior loop and just press Shift X. And then if I was to just select the entire thing and just press unfold just to confirm things are good, again, that's now correct as well. So everything is now unwrapped. We just need to pack everything correctly and make sure the textile rate is correct. So with that there, we did get the textile rate on that. So if I just do it again on that just in case, I'm going to select everything. I'm just going to select every single individual shell, and I'm just going to press set, and that's going to rescale everything correctly in relation to each other. And then I'm going to press unfold, click on orient, and then click on layout. So that there has done a very good job. The thing to note is we've got a situation where there's a vast amount of empty space, and that is primarily because this is keeping obviously the correct textile rate, but as a result it's scaling everything else down to accommodate that. So this is where you make a judgment call. I think, well, actually, is it worthwhile having this impacting the textile rate and every other potential component, or do you split this into potentially 2 or 3 smaller parts? My feeling is that this one here we can probably split into three parts at least. So I'm going to make a judgment call and put a split there, Shift X. Obviously we will have a seam at that point, but hopefully Painter will resolve that. And then simply a matter of pressing layout again. So that's given us a far better result. Obviously we've maximized UV space now, so that's a good sign. So I'm just going to save our file while we're here. Control S. And now we are effectively good to go. So let's now try baking this and seeing the end result with those wonderful chamfers on there. But before we do that, there is some additional considerations. Obviously, when I mentioned layout previously, just confirm that you have got the best possible layout or unfold. So what I'm going to do is I'm try unfold 3D again. Again, the legacy one here, it has done a good job. I can't see anything majorly problematic there. In fact, it's perfect. There's nothing really to be concerned about. But, it is the old one, so I'm assuming the Unfold 3D, which is the new Unfold technique, I'm assuming that would give me a better job. So really, I should probably try this before I do anything else. So I'm just going to press layout again. And it hasn't made a jot of difference, which probably suggests that, it's actually good to go, yeah. Oh, in fact, what we haven't done is we haven't set the padding options within our layout. So I'm going to press Shift, click on Layout. We're back on Unfold 3D. We'll need to put a shell padding of 2 pixels on there, and let's try doing that again. Obviously, we need to make sure we select everything before we do that. So I'm just going to press Undo. I forgot to click on the individual shells, and just do a layout again. There we are. So now it's got a nice gap in between everything. And I think that's given us a better result to what we had previously as well. So that there is perfectly fine. No need to sit there and move around these individual shells now. So let's dump this into Painter, and that'll be the very next tutorial.